I placed the pecan pie on the cold marble island, the one I'd baked in my own oven 2 miles away, and slowly unbuttoned my coat. My fingers fumbled with the buttons, but not from the chill of the late November evening. They trembled because I'd just seen the seating chart, the final, elegant proof of what I'd been willfully ignoring for years. My name, Eleanor, was in the kitchen, penned in beautiful script next to staff. My son, Thomas, had done it. He'd literally categorized me with the caterers for his perfect Thanksgiving. If your heart just dropped into your stomach, if you know that feeling of being erased in plain sight, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to the channel. Stay with me. My story isn't over, and there are more like it waiting to be heard. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply turned and walked back through the soaring foyer of the house I'd contributed $45,000 to help purchase, past the hired valet who gave me a puzzled look, and out into the twilight. I left behind the pie, my grandmother's recipe, the sweet potato casserole still warm in its dish, and 38 years of believing my only child's distance was just a phase, just his busy life, just anything but the cold, hard truth. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and swelling silence. I'm Eleanor, I'm 62 years old, and until that moment in my son's $1 million doorway, I defined myself by the empty spaces I filled for others. A retired high school English teacher, a widow for 6 years, a mother of one, Thomas, age 38, and a grandmother to a sweet, shy little boy named Henry, age 7. A professional placeholder, a utility. It didn't begin with a seating chart, it began with a pronoun. About 3 years ago, my daughter-in-law, Penelope, started referring to me as the grandmother when speaking to Henry. Not Grandma Ellie or even your grandmother, just the grandmother, as if I were a function, not a person. The grandmother is coming on Tuesday, she'd say into her phone, standing right beside me. Make sure the gardener is gone before the grandmother arrives. When I mentioned it to Thomas, he'd waved a hand, his eyes on his own phone screen. She doesn't mean anything by it, Mom. It's just shorthand. Shorthand for my diminishing role. I should have seen it then, but I was too busy being useful. That was my currency, my value. I was the reliable one, the available one. When Henry was born, I took a full semester of unpaid leave to help. I was there for the 2 a.m. feedings when Penelope was touched out, and there for the laundry, the cooking, the silent, invisible labor that holds a household together. I told myself I was building a bond. I was building a cage. The requests, always framed as needs, became mandates. Could I cover the cost of Henry's preschool tuition for a month while they sorted cash flow? A check for $2,850 dated March 14th. Could I house sit for 10 days while they went to Napa because they didn't trust anyone else with the security system? I slept in their guest bed, watered their orchids, and collected 17 packages, none of which were for me. Could I, would I, might I? The questions faded, replaced by calendar invites. Eleanor, Henry pickup, 3 p.m., Tuesday. No greeting, no please, just an entry on the shared digital calendar Penelope had insisted we all use for efficiency. My life became a series of appointments in service to theirs. And I accepted it, because when Robert died, a part of me felt my primary job was done. Thomas was my legacy, my purpose. Being needed by him felt like a continuation of that purpose. I confused occupancy with love. Thanksgiving to be the crowning glory of their home renovation, the one I'd financially seeded. Penelope, an interior designer, had been planning it for months. I received a PDF itinerary a week prior. Thanksgiving Day Schedule, it was titled. My arrival was listed at 1 p.m., my assigned task, kitchen support and Henry supervision. I arrived at 12:58 p.m., carrying my contributions, dressed in a nice pair of trousers and a silk blouse. I wasn't staff, I was family. I had to believe that. Penelope answered the door, clad in a cream-colored cashmere set that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Eleanor, right on time. She didn't smile. Henry's in the media room. He's overstimulated. Can you just contain him? The florist is finishing up, and I cannot have him underfoot." "Of course," I said, the automatic response. "I brought the pie and the casserole." "She just set it in the kitchen," she said, already turning away. "The caterers will deal with it." I found Henry glued to a tablet, headphones on. He looked up and gave me a small, tired smile. "Hi, Grandma Ellie." "Hi, my love." I sat next to him, my heart rate settling. This, at least, was real. We sat for an hour, watching part of a movie, but I was distracted by the symphony of preparation happening beyond the closed door. The clatter of fine china, the murmur of hired servers, the sharp, perfumed laughter of Penelope's friends who had arrived early. At one point, I needed the restroom. The one near the media room was, according to a handwritten tent card, for guests. I felt a prickle of absurdity. Was I not a guest? I used it anyway. On my way back, I passed the entrance to the formal dining room. It was breathtaking. A long table stretched like a runway, set with gold-rimmed china, crystal goblets that caught the light, and tall, ornate centerpieces of autumn blooms. At each place was a cream-colored card, calligraphied with a name. I shouldn't have looked. It was an invasion of their meticulous planning, but I did. I saw names I recognized: Penelope's parents, her sister, Thomas's law partner and his wife, a local news anchor Penelope admired. My eyes scanned the 12 settings. My name wasn't there. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Perhaps I was at the smaller table in the breakfast nook? I looked toward it. It was set for 4, with simpler linens. Those place cards read Henry, the nanny, catering manager, and staff. And next to staff, in that same flowing script, was Eleanor. The world narrowed to that word, that placement. Staff. I was not family. I was not a guest. I was hired help who happened to be related. The proof was irrefutable, elegant, and cruel. I stood there for a full minute, the sounds of the house becoming muffled, as if I were underwater. This was the culmination. The paper cuts had finally severed the limb. I walked back to the kitchen, a space bustling with professionals in black and white. My dishes were shoved to the side on the counter. My pecan pie looked homespun and foolish next to the caterer's perfect miniature pumpkin tarts. I didn't retrieve them. They weren't mine anymore. They were provisions for the event, supplied by a vendor. Me. That's when I walked out. I collected my coat from the closet, gave a last glance toward the media room where my grandson sat, and left. My house, a compact Tudor I'd refused to sell despite Thomas's hints about right-sizing, welcomed me with its familiar, quiet shadows. It smelled of old books and the lemon polish I used. It smelled like me. I made a cup of tea and sat at my own small wooden kitchen table, the one Robert and I had found at a flea market decades ago. My phone lit up. Thomas. "Mom, where did you go? Henry's asking for you. We're about to sit for dinner." The anger arrived then, fought and clear. I typed back. "I saw the seating chart. I'm not staff, Thomas. Enjoy your dinner with your actual guests." 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No response came. The holiday weekend unfolded in a strange, suspended silence. I ignored the subsequent texts that shifted from confused to annoyed. I turned off my phone. I read a novel for the pleasure of it. I took long walks without telling anyone where I was. The autonomy was terrifying and exhilarating. On Sunday evening, I called my sister, Celia, who lived in Arizona. We weren't particularly close, the miles and years having built a polite distance. "Ellie, everything okay?" she asked, hearing the strain in my voice. I told her. I told her about the place card, the calendar invites, the $6,000 I'd loaned them for their patio last spring that was never mentioned again, the way Penelope's voice took on a specific, impatient tone reserved only for me. Celia listened. Then she said, "Well, it's about damn time." "What?" Eleanor, we've all seen it. I saw it at your birthday dinner last year when Penelope redirected every story you told, and Thomas just watched. Mom saw it before she passed. She worried about you constantly. She said you'd gotten so small living in that boy's shadow. The words landed like stones. Why didn't anyone say anything? Would you have listened? Celia's voice was gentle but firm. You were so determined to be the perfect, unobtrusive mother, the helpful grandma. You wore that sacrifice like a badge. It's hard to confront someone who's convinced they're being saintly. It was a brutal mirror. I had been a willing participant in my own diminishment. I had conflated self-erasure with love. The next week, I did something concrete. I went to my bank and got a printed statement for the joint savings account I'd foolishly kept with Thomas for emergencies. The balance was $12,430. On Tuesday, November 28th, I transferred the entire amount into an account in my name only. I sent him a photo of the transfer confirmation. My message was simple. I am no longer a shared resource. My resources are my own. His call was immediate. What the hell, Mom? That was our emergency fund. It was my money, Thomas. Every deposit for the last 6 years has been from my pension. What emergency of mine were you planning to solve with it? That's not the point. We're family. We share. Do we? I asked, my voice frighteningly calm. When have you ever shared with me? Your time? Your respect? A seat at your damn table? You share a servant, Thomas, not a mother. He was sputtering. This is because of the place card? It was a mistake. The calligrapher misheard Penelope. Did she? I said. Or did she simply write down what she was told? I'm not arguing about this. The money is mine. Consider it my first step in no longer being staff. I hung up. It was a small, financial act of reclamation. It felt seismic. I began the slow, painful process of unbecoming. I took down the gallery wall of Thomas photos that dominated my hallway, the professional shots of him, Penelope, and Henry, where I was conspicuously absent. I packed them away. In their place, I hung a vibrant, abstract painting I bought from a local artist, using a fraction of the money I'd reclaimed. It was splashes of coral and deep blue. It didn't match anything. It was just beautiful to me. Penelope broke first. She arrived at my door unannounced 2 weeks before Christmas, holding a ludicrously large poinsettia. "Eleanor," she said, her smile tight, "can we talk?" I let her in. She perched on my sofa, looking around as if seeing the space for the first time. "You've changed things." "I have." "Look," she began, placing the poinsettia on my coffee table like a peace offering. "Thanksgiving was a mess, a misunderstanding. Henry missed you. We all did." "Did you?" I asked, sitting across from her. "What's my name, Penelope?" "What?" "On your phone. In your contacts. What's my name?" She hesitated, color rising in her cheeks. "It's Eleanor." Not Mom, not Ellie, and certainly not Thomas's mom, just Eleanor, like a colleague or a contractor. "I have my own mother," she said defensively, repeating the old mantra. "I know you do, and I am not her. I am Henry's grandmother, I am Thomas's mother, but I am also Eleanor, and Eleanor is tired of being an afterthought in a utility vest." She stared at me, and for a moment I saw not a villain, but a woman also trapped in a role. The perfect wife, the flawless hostess, the demanding in-law. My constant silent helpfulness had perhaps been a mirror reflecting her own inadequacies back at her, making her resent me more. "I don't know how to do this," she said quietly, her defiance crumbling. "Do what?" "Have you as a person. It was easier when you were just the grandmother, a function, a known quantity." It was a stunning, ugly moment of honesty. It was easier for me, too, I admitted, surprising us both. It's easier to follow a script than to write your own lines, but the script was killing me. We sat in silence for a long moment. Henry talks about you, she finally said. He drew a picture at school of his family. He included you in this house with a big smile. He put you right in the center. The image undid me. A single tear escaped. I didn't wipe it away. I want to see him, but not as the babysitter, not as staff, as his grandma, on my terms, here for 2 hours on a Saturday with no other agenda. Penelope nodded slowly. I can do that. It was the first brick in a new, fragile wall of boundaries. Thomas, however, dug in his heels. His calls became lectures about forgiveness, about not holding grudges, about how I was breaking up the family right before Christmas. The climax came on December 23rd. He showed up at my house, his face a mask of frustrated entitlement. This has gone on long enough, Mom. He strode into my living room without an invitation. You're coming to Christmas Eve dinner tomorrow. Penelope has gone to a lot of trouble. Henry is expecting you. We're all expecting you. This childish rebellion ends now. I remained standing. It's not a rebellion, Thomas. It's a resurrection. And no, I'm not coming. Why not? He demanded, throwing his hands up. To punish me? To prove a point? To preserve myself, I said calmly. Your home is not a safe place for me right now. It hasn't been for years. You look at me and see a tool, a problem solver, a free babysitter. You don't see me, and until you can, I won't be there. That's insane. I'm your son. And what does that mean to you? I fired back, my own voice rising. What does that title grant you? Unlimited access to my time, my money, my emotional labor, with zero obligation to see me as a human being with my own needs? Is that the contract? You're being dramatic, he shouted. The words echoed in my quiet space. You've always been so dramatic. Dad knew how to handle you, to calm you down. I just don't have the patience for it. The air left the room. He had never spoken to me like that. And he had invoked his father, the one person whose absence had left me most vulnerable. I walked to the front door and opened it. The cold winter air rushed in. Get out. Mom, get out of my house. Now. He looked shocked, then furious. He marched past me, stopping on the front step. You're going to die alone in this house, you know that, with your paintings and your principles, and you'll have no one to blame but yourself. It was the cruelest thing he'd ever said. It was designed to break me, to send me running back, apologizing, begging to be allowed back into the fold on any terms. I met his gaze. Then that will be my choice, not your sentence. Goodbye, Thomas. I closed the door. I locked it. I slid down against the wood and finally wept. Not the quiet tears of a wounded mother, but the great heaving sobs of a woman mourning the son she thought she had, the relationship she dreamed of, the future she had assumed was hers. It was a funeral held against my own front door. Christmas was quiet. Celia flew in, a surprise that made me weep all over again. We cooked a small goose, drank too much wine, and laughed about our childhoods. She gave me the gift of presents with no demands. In January, I started therapy. Dr. Rosen helped me unpack a lifetime of equating love with utility. I began to write again, not lesson plans, but messy, emotional journal entries and snippets of poetry I'd abandoned decades ago. I joined a community center book club. The first book we read was about resilient women in history. I spoke up during the discussion. My voice wavered, but it was heard. Spring brought a thaw, both outside and in. Thomas's angry calls stopped. The silence was heavy, but it was cleaner than the toxic exchanges. Penelope, oddly, became the bridge. She honored our agreement, bringing Henry over every other Saturday. Our visits were simple. We baked cookies, we read books, we worked in my small garden. I was just Grandma Ellie, not a multitasking assistant. I learned about his school, his fear of spiders, his love of dinosaurs. It was pure, unmediated by his parents' agenda. One Saturday in April, as we were planting pansies, Henry looked up at me, his small face serious. "Grandma Ellie, are you and Daddy not friends anymore?" The question was a tiny dagger. "Your daddy and I love each other very much," I said, choosing my words with care. "But sometimes when people love each other, they need to take a little break to remember how to be kind. We're in a kind of time-out." He considered this. "I have time-outs when I'm not nice to Mommy." "Yes," I said, my throat tight. "It's a bit like that." "I hope your time-out ends soon," he said, and went back to patting soil around a purple flower. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." The turning point came from an unexpected source, a diagnosis. In May, after weeks of fatigue, I was told I had a treatable but serious autoimmune condition. It would require medication, lifestyle changes, and rest. It made my mortality, my physical limits, starkly real. I debated telling Thomas. My therapist urged me to. "He is still your son. This is a fact of your life. Share it from a place of information, not a plea for care." I sent him a calm, factual email outlining the diagnosis, the treatment plan, and assuring him it was manageable. I did not ask for anything. His response arrived 3 days later. Not an email, not a text. He was on my doorstep, looking rumpled and afraid. "Mom?" I let him in. He stood in the living room, looking lost. "Why didn't you call? Why an email?" It felt like the most respectful way to share information without obligation. "Obligation?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm your son. It's my obligation. It's my—" He trailed off, the word right hanging unspoken. "It's what, Thomas?" I asked gently. "I was going to say right," he admitted, sounding horrified at himself. "That's what you mean, isn't it? I think I have rights to you, to your time, your health information, your everything. But I don't give you the right to be a full person in my life." The insight was so direct, it winded me. He was doing the work. "Sit down," I said. We sat. He cried. Not manipulative tears, but the deep, shuddering tears of shame and realization. He talked about the pressure of his life, the image he had to maintain, how he'd absorbed Penelope's view of me as a tool because it was convenient. He talked about missing his dad and how he'd somehow transferred the expectation of being cared for entirely onto me. He apologized. Not a blanket "I'm sorry," but a specific, gut-wrenching inventory of his cruelties, both large and small, ending with the words he'd hurled on my doorstep. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said, his head in his hands. "Forgiveness isn't about what you deserve," I said, my own eyes wet. "It's about me not wanting to carry the poison anymore. I can forgive you, Thomas, but forgiveness is not permission to go back to the way things were. We can only go forward differently, or not at all." He looked up, his eyes red. "I want to go forward. I'm scared. I don't know the rules." "We'll write them together," I said, "and the first rule is, I am a person first. My illness, my time, my energy, my resources, they are mine to manage. You can ask, you cannot assume." He nodded, a child learning a new language. The reconstruction was slower, more deliberate than the demolition. Thomas started seeing his own therapist. We began having monthly lunches, just the two of us, at a neutral diner. The conversations were awkward at first, stilted. We talked about books, current events, safe topics. Slowly, we ventured into harder territory. I told him about my writing. He told me about his fears of failing at work. It was the beginning of knowing each other as adults. For the 4th of July, they invited me to a small barbecue. I went, but with clear boundaries. I stayed for 2 hours. I brought one dish. I played with Henry. I engaged in polite conversation with Penelope. When the 2 hours were up, I hugged Henry, thanked them, and left. It was peaceful. I was a guest. As autumn approached, the shadow of Thanksgiving loomed. I knew they would ask. I had already decided my answer. I would not go, but I would not hide. In October, Thomas asked me over for coffee. After we sat, he took a deep breath. "We'd like to host Thanksgiving again this year. We'd like you to come, as a guest, a real guest, at the main table. Your name will be on a place card that says Grandma Ellie." The offer was earnest. It was meant to be an olive branch, a full-circle correction. I reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you for that invitation. It means more than you know, but I won't be coming." His face fell. "Why? Is it not enough? What else do I need to do?" "It's not about you," I said. "It's about me. That house, that holiday, it's a stage where I played a painful role for too long. The memory is too fresh. I need to build my own traditions now, traditions where I am the host of my own life, not a guest in someone else's version of it." He was quiet, digesting the rejection. "What will you do?" "I'm having friends over," I said, and it was true. Celia was coming, along with 2 women from my book club. We're cooking together. It will be loud and imperfect and joyful. He squeezed my hand. "I'm glad. Will you see Henry that weekend?" "Of course," I said. "You can all come here for dessert on Friday. I'll make the pecan pie." A real smile touched his lips. "The one with the bourbon?" "The very same." And so, on Thanksgiving Day, I stood in my own kitchen, the one I'd painted a cheery yellow, surrounded by the laughter of women who chose to be with me. We drank wine while the turkey roasted. We talked over each other. We made a glorious mess. At one point, while basting the bird, I looked out my kitchen window at the bare trees. I thought of the place card that had broken me. I thought of the long, lonely walk to my car. I thought of the tears shed against the door. And I felt not anger, not sadness, but a profound sense of gratitude. That moment of ultimate disrespect had been the catalyst for my ultimate respect, self-respect. My new life isn't a fairy tale. Thomas and I are still learning. Some days are easier than others. Penelope and I have reached a cordial détente, built on mutual respect for boundaries rather than deep affection. Henry is the constant, beautiful bridge. But I am Eleanor again, not just Thomas's mother, not just Henry's grandmother, a woman who writes bad poetry, who argues about novels, who hosts imperfect dinners, who manages a chronic condition with grace, who says no without guilt, and who finally understands that love should make you larger, not smaller. The greatest rebellion is choosing to take up space in your own life, and I am finally, gloriously, rebelliously home. If any part of my story resonated with you, if you've ever felt yourself fading into the background of someone else's life, please share your experience in the comments below. You are not alone. And if you want to hear more stories of women finding their way back to themselves, subscribe to the channel. Stay with me for the next one. Your strength might be the whisper someone else needs to hear.